Switzerland is the most expensive country in Europe. A simple coffee in Zurich costs about 5 francs. A modest 2-bedroom apartment can swallow 3,000 francs a month before you have bought a single grocery. And yet, if you drive through the Alpine valleys at dawn, past the villages of Lauterbrunnen or along the shore of Lake Lucerne, you will find hundreds of people waking up in vans parked beneath the mountains. Not because they failed, because they chose this. And the fastest growing group among them is not who you think. To understand why anyone would live in a van in a country this wealthy, you first have to understand what Swiss wealth actually costs. Take Zurich, the financial capital, where glass bank towers stand a short tram ride from the old town. Salaries here are famously high. A nurse might earn 6,000 or 7,000 francs a month, but an ordinary 1-bedroom apartment near the city can cost over 2,000 francs, and that is if you can get one at all. Vacancy rates in Zurich and Geneva sit near zero. People line up 30 deep for apartment viewings, holding folders with their salary statements and reference letters like job applicants. A kilo of chicken in a Swiss supermarket costs more than most Europeans pay for a full meal out. Health insurance is mandatory and starts around 300 francs a month for a single adult. In Switzerland, even people with good jobs can feel like they are running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. That treadmill is exactly what Thomas and Claudia stepped off. They are a Swiss couple in their late 50s, and their story is one you hear again and again in the campervan parking areas along Lake Thun. For nearly 30 years, Thomas worked as an electrician in the Bern region while Claudia managed a small bakery counter. They lived in a rented apartment, paid their bills on time, and watched the rent climb year after year while their view stayed the same, a gray facade across a narrow street. Then Thomas ran the numbers one winter evening at the kitchen table. Their apartment, insurance, parking spot, and utilities were consuming more than 4,000 francs every month. Almost half their working life was going toward a box they mostly used for sleeping, so they made a decision their friends called insane. They gave notice on the apartment, sold most of their furniture, and bought a used Fiat Ducato camper with 140,000 kilometers on the clock. It cost them 32,000 francs, roughly 8 months of their old fixed expenses. The downsizing was harder than the decision. 30 years of life had to fit into roughly 2 cubic meters of storage. Claudia says the furniture went easily, but the boxes in the cellar nearly stopped them. Photo albums, her mother's china, the children's school drawings. In the end, they rented the smallest storage unit they could find, 5 square meters in an industrial building outside Thun, and everything that did not fit was given away or sold at the flea market in Bern. Thomas says the strangest part was watching a stranger carry away the sofa they had owned for 2 decades and feeling, instead of grief, something closer to lightness. Inside the van, there is a bed above the rear garage, a 2-burner gas stove, a small wet bathroom, and a dining table that looks out through a wide side window. The first morning they woke up in it, they were parked at a small campsite above Interlaken. Claudia opened the blinds and saw the snow-covered face of the Jungfrau filling the entire window. She said it was the best view either of them had ever paid for. It cost them 18 francs for the night. But this is where most people assume the story gets easy, and it does not. Because Switzerland may have the most beautiful parking spots in the world, and it also has some of the strictest rules about who is allowed to sleep in them. Wild camping in Switzerland is a legal patchwork that confuses even the Swiss. There is no single national law. Each of the 26 cantons sets its own rules, and then individual communes layer their own regulations on top. In many lowland areas, sleeping overnight in a vehicle outside a designated site is simply forbidden, and police do knock on van doors at 2 in the morning. Fines can run over 100 francs. Around famous lakes like Lake Geneva and popular villages like Grindelwald, signs with a crossed-out camper van appear at nearly every scenic pullout, because the region learned the hard way. What happens when a viral photo spot meets 10,000 vans in one summer? And yet, higher up, the picture changes. In much of the Swiss mountains, a single night above the tree line is broadly tolerated for self-sufficient travelers, as long as you arrive late, leave early, and leave absolutely nothing behind. Van dwellers learn this unwritten choreography quickly. They spend their afternoons in the valleys, filling water tanks at cemetery fountains and village taps, buying bread at Coop and Migros supermarkets, and then, as the tour buses drain away in the evening, they climb. Up the switchbacks of the Grimsel Pass, past the dark granite and the turquoise reservoir lakes, to a gravel shoulder at 2,000 meters where the only sound at night is wind and the distant clonk of cowbells. Many also rely on a quiet handshake economy. Swiss farmers will often let a tidy camper stay on the edge of a meadow for 10 or 20 francs, sometimes for nothing more than a polite conversation and a promise to close the gate. There is also an official middle path. Switzerland has hundreds of campsites, many run by the Touring Club Suisse, and a growing network of simple motorhome stopovers with water and electricity for 15 to 30 francs a night. There are even Swiss apps now that map every legal stopover, every fountain, and every welcoming farm, maintained by the van dwellers themselves. Thomas and Claudia use a mix of everything. 2 or 3 nights on a farm, a night on a mountain pass, then a proper campsite with hot showers and a washing machine. Their total living cost, including diesel, food, insurance, campsite fees, and the annual motorway vignette sticker every Swiss driver must buy, comes to roughly 1,800 francs a month for both of them, less than half of what their old stationary life consumed. Part of that number comes from a trick every Swiss van dweller learns within the first month: the borders. Switzerland is small, and Germany, France, and Italy are never more than a tank of diesel away. So the vans do what Swiss families living near the border have always done. They cross. A weekly shop in Constance or in a French hypermarket just past Geneva costs roughly half of what the same basket costs at home. Meat, cheese, coffee, wine. Thomas keeps a folder of receipts as a kind of hobby, and by his accounting, one border run a month saves them nearly 200 francs. The van, it turns out, is not just a home that moves. It is a home that can drive itself to cheaper groceries. And instead of a gray facade, their window now cycles through the Matterhorn, the vineyards of Lavaux, and the waterfalls of the Lauterbrunnen Valley. Now, if that arithmetic sounds tempting, hold that thought, because the Swiss calendar has a way of testing every romantic idea. It is called November. Winter is the great filter of van life in the Alps. Around late October, the high passes close one by one. The Furka, the Susten, the Grimsel, all barricaded under meters of snow until June. Temperatures in the mountain valleys drop well below freezing and stay there. Water tanks freeze solid. Gas bottles lose pressure. Condensation from a single night of breathing turns to frost on the inside of the windows. This is the season when the summer romantics sell their vans, and the serious ones reveal themselves. The people who stay learn a whole new craft. They install diesel heaters that sip fuel from the vehicle tank and run all night, keeping the cabin at a steady 20 degrees while ice glitters on the windshield outside. They line their walls with extra insulation, put reflective mats in every window, and wrap their water systems in heating cables. They also learn a hard lesson about electricity. The solar panels that kept their batteries full through the endless days of June produce almost nothing under the low gray skies of December, when the sun barely clears the ridgelines for a few hours. So the winter people carry lithium batteries the size of suitcases, plug in at serviced pitches whenever they can, and treat every ampere like money. Even emptying the gray water tank becomes a tactical operation, done quickly at midday before the valve can freeze shut again. They carry snow chains by law on many Alpine roads and learn to read the avalanche bulletins the way office workers read the morning news. Many follow the sun in miniature, spending December through February in the milder lowlands near Lake Geneva or down in the Italian-speaking canton of Ticino, where palm trees grow along the lakefront in Lugano and winter feels almost Mediterranean. Others do the opposite. They park near ski resorts like Andermatt, paying for a serviced winter camping pitch, and wake up 50 meters from the lift while hotel guests around them pay 400 francs a night for the same snow. Claudia admits the first winter nearly broke them. A heater failure at -12 degrees near Davos had them sleeping in ski clothes under 3 duvets, watching their breath form clouds inside their own home. But they fixed it, learned from it, and stayed. She says something interesting about that night. In the apartment, she says, "Nothing ever happened to us." In the van, things happen to us every week, and that is the point. By the following spring, Thomas and Claudia had company, and it was not the company you might expect. The fastest growing group in the Swiss van scene is not young influencers, it is retirees. People in their 60s and 70s who spent 4 decades commuting through the fog of the Swiss plateau and decided their pension would buy more life on wheels than in walls. You see them at the motorhome areas along Lake Neuchâtel, silver-haired couples in matching fleece jackets, their campers immaculate, tiny Swiss flags sometimes mounted by the door. One of them is a man named Ruedi, a former postal worker from Aargau in his early 70s. When his wife passed away, the apartment they had shared for 35 years became unbearable to him. Every room an echo. He sold nearly everything, bought a modest camper, and now follows a slow annual loop. Spring among the blooming cherry trees of Valais, summer high in the Engadin Valley near St. Moritz, autumn among the golden larches, winter down by the palm-lined promenades of Ticino. His pension of about 2,400 francs a month, an amount that would mean a tight and lonely life in a Swiss city, funds a life he describes with one word: enough. If you are enjoying this look into how people really live, take a second and subscribe, because every week we travel somewhere new to answer the same question. What does ordinary life actually look like there? His days have a shape his working life never allowed. Coffee at 7 with the door open if the weather permits. A long walk. Lunch cooked slowly on 2 burners. In the afternoon, he reads or fishes or drives 20 minutes to whichever village is having its market day. He eats well, he sleeps beside lakes, and every few weeks he parks near his grandchildren in Lucerne. He says he has never felt less alone. Part of the reason is the community that forms around this life. Van dwellers in Switzerland recognize each other on the passes and flash their headlights in greeting. At the stopover areas, the etiquette is almost ceremonial. You park straight, you keep your pitch tidy, and by the second evening someone has wandered over to ask about your heater or your route. Information is the local currency here. Which pass opened this week? Which farmer near Appenzell takes campers? Which village fountain has drinkable water? Ruedi belongs to a loose group of about a dozen retired van dwellers who track each other across the country, meeting for coffee when their loops overlap. Not friends in the old sense, he says. Something looser, and in a strange way, more reliable. But money, grief, and company only explain part of it. To understand the rest, you have to look at the roads themselves, because Switzerland has quietly built the greatest driving landscape on earth, and the van dwellers are the only people who get to keep it after sunset. There is an official route called the Grand Tour of Switzerland, 1,600 kilometers looping past 22 lakes and over 5 great Alpine passes, marked with small brown signs. Tourists rush it in a week. Van dwellers dissolve into it for years. They cross the Furka Pass, the same hairpin road where James Bond's silver Aston Martin was filmed in Goldfinger and where the Rhone Glacier hangs in the distance like a frozen wave. They climb the cobbled old road of the Gotthard, the Tremela, 24 granite hairpin bends stacked on a mountainside like ribbon. In autumn, they follow the light east into the Engadin, over the Julier or the Albula, to a valley floor at 1,800 meters where the larch forests turn gold in October and the lakes at Sils and Silvaplana go still as mirrors. They take the Susten for its glacier views and the Klausen for its emptiness, and they learn which gravel pullouts face east, because an east-facing window means sunrise in bed. They drift along the terraced vineyards of Lavaux above Lake Geneva, where the evening sun turns the water to hammered gold, and they park for the night above the tree line, while every tourist bus descends to a hotel. That is the real secret of this life. Everyone gets Switzerland from 9 to 5. The vans get it at sunrise, when the Eiger turns pink and the meadows are still silver with dew and there is no other human being in sight. Claudia has a photograph from one of those mornings above Grindelwald, taken through the windshield, of a chamois standing in the middle of the road in the first light, looking back at the van as if wondering what it was doing there. Ruedi calls this the millionaire hour. For 60 minutes every morning, he says, "I own a view that no bank account in Zurich can buy." However, it would be dishonest to end the story there, because every person in this video, when you talk to them long enough, tells you about the other side, the side that never appears in the photographs. Living in a van in Switzerland means your entire home is roughly 10 square meters. Every argument happens within arm's reach of the other person. Every rainy week is spent inside a metal box drumming with water. Laundry becomes a military operation planned around campsite machines. A simple doctor's appointment requires an address, so most van dwellers keep an official residence with a relative or through a service, because in Switzerland you cannot legally exist without one. Health insurance still costs its 300 francs a month whether you live in a penthouse or a parking lot. Vans break down and Swiss mechanics charge Swiss prices, sometimes 150 francs an hour. And there is the quieter problem nobody likes to discuss: body's age. Knees that climbed happily into an overhead bed at 58 protest at 72. Ruedi has already accepted that one day, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10, the van will have to go, and he will move into a small flat near his family. He is at peace with it. He says he would rather have 10 real years than 30 comfortable ones spent waiting. There is also a tension building in Switzerland itself. As housing costs climb, more people are living in vehicles out of necessity rather than choice, especially around Zurich and Geneva, where a converted van can be the only affordable roof for a working person. Social workers in Lausanne and Zurich now count the vehicles on certain quiet streets the way they once counted beds in shelters, and among them are people with full-time jobs. A kitchen worker, a delivery driver, a young teacher saving for a deposit that keeps moving further away. Communities are debating new rules, some building more official stopover places, others banning overnight parking entirely. The postcard country is being forced to ask an uncomfortable question. If a nurse or a carpenter cannot afford to live near the town they serve, is the problem the van in the parking lot, or the price of the walls around it? Thomas and Claudia think about that question often, usually in the evening, when the stove is on and the mountains outside the window are fading to blue shadows. They know their life looks like an escape. They insist it is actually a return. For most of human history, they point out, people moved with the seasons, followed the good weather, and lived close to the land. The Swiss themselves did it for centuries, driving cattle up to the high Alps every summer and back down every autumn. In a way, the camper vans crawling over the Grimsel Pass each June are just the newest version of the oldest Swiss tradition there is. On their kitchen shelf, held in place by a small wooden rail for the winding roads, Thomas and Claudia keep one object from the old apartment. It is the key to a front door that no longer belongs to them. Claudia says they kept it as a question, not a souvenir. Every few months they hold it up and ask each other whether they miss what it used to open. So far, the answer has always been the same. They look out the window at whichever lake or glacier happens to be their front yard that week, and they put the key back on the shelf. Home, it turns out, was never the address. If you want to see what this same choice looks like somewhere far colder, watch our video on how people live through the polar winter in the north of Norway. It is on your screen now.